Good morning, everyone. So, today's lecture will be predominantly about the ongoing conflict between Israel. Yesterday, we have discussed certain important, I've given you a background also. Now, there is an ongoing conflict between both the sides. Okay, that is one issue. And we will also look at the importance of having safety standards in the context of the recent Air India crash. Okay, but before that, let's take a look at some of the headlines and the homework that you have to do, what kind of things that you have to note down. Good morning, everyone. So, in today's lecture, we'll be looking at two important issues. But before that, let's take a look at the headlines and quickly note what are the things that you have to take down. Firstly, okay, firstly, we need to know what is the importance of black box. The minute you look at this black box, what are the questions that you need to ask so that you have a clarity and what things you can take away for your prelims examination. Okay, so in science and technology, material technology is one of the theme. Materials, you will have questions on these materials. Okay, so what kind of material is this black box made of? What kind? Because, okay, before I get into this part, I'll briefly explain what a black box means. Black box is that part of the aircraft which will survive even a crash like this, and it will have some equipment which records the conversations between the command center, air traffic command center, and the pilots. If there is any conversation going on between them, or in the final minutes, if the pilots were able to figure out what the problem was, usually they will be recorded in this black box. So if they have to survive a crash like this, where it was a fatal, whoever was part of that crash, nobody survived except one person who probably escaped because he was near to a emergency exit just before the crash. So, what kind of material is that? That is the first question you need to ask. Now, here there is a ministry called, sorry, there is a body called Directorate General of Civil Aviation, DGCA. Prelims questions can be possible from this area. If you take a look at the entire civil aviation sector, meaning commercial aircrafts for passengers, there are many regulatory stakeholders. For example, DGCA. Then you have Airports Authority of India, and the Ministry of Civil Aviation, and the airliners themselves. For example, in this case, Air India. So all these stakeholders do have a say in ensuring safe travel to the passengers. What is the corresponding role? We will be looking at that in the editorial. But for now, understand this. Take a look at this. DGCA issues guidelines. Says that we have to check fuel parameters monitoring and associated system checks. Just focus on this. I will get back to this points. Here it is about standards. What about the other stakeholders? Let's have a look. Is there any other thing? Okay. Israel strikes Iran nuclear sites. Yesterday we spoke about nuclear enrichment as a concept. Yes? So in this nuclear enrichment, what are the points that you need to take away? Which, one second. You can't see this, right? Probably. It's not visible. Okay, fine. So there are some sites, nuclear sites that Israel attacked. For example, Natanz. In your next year prelims, you might get locations like these as a part of your mapping questions. So whenever there is an international conflict and whenever you see places in news, historically what was there in the last 5 years become important for prelims. So you need to observe this on the map and store it in your prelims notes. Okay, that is the takeaway. Next up. Okay, excise policy. What do you mean by excise policy? Now, another homework that you need to do so that you will understand this news. In our Indian polity, you have Article 246. Under that, you have Schedule 7. With respect to alcohol, that is liquor, what do you mean by this excise policy? Now, this is the first thing you need to search for. Why am I asking you to search? Why am I not directly telling you? Because unless you do this activity, you will not be able to take some value out of it. So when I'm saying this excise policy, it is related to liquor. Where will you see the word alcohol in the Schedule 7? State list. Okay. So what is the relation of alcohol to the taxation power? Is GST applied on alcohol? If no, why? I want you to be curious. Recently there was a change in policy on taxation even in Maharashtra. Why did that happen? How is this liquor linked to freebies discussion? These are the things that you need to Google. Just searching for it, you will find the answers. But when you're reading this kind of articles, that's when you will actually form those interlinkages in the long run. Otherwise, it's difficult to just by heart something and clear the exam for next year. Make it a habit from now itself. Every person who is regularly attending these classes and doing the homework that I'm asking them to do, instead of actually expecting some spoon feeding, you are not engaging your mind on that activity. You will not get the takeaway. Even if you're sitting and listening to me, there's nothing that you will take away after probably a week. But if you're actually doing this activity on a daily basis, much more important than any of the classes that you will be attending, these newspapers will make huge difference in your exam. Okay. When they are looking at DNA samples for identification, okay, you can link this to Article 19 or Article 21. Okay, what are the limitations of the media on, let's say, when you're looking at this DNA samples of the victims, when those samples are taken, do you think it's right for media to showcase those pictures and say that this, human remains belong to so and so person and this identification happened through DNA sampling? Imagine the amount of grief the families will feel. So there needs to be an element of sensitivity in media reporting, right? So there is something called in Article 19 Clause 2 reasonable restriction. Within that you have public order and morality. So it is a self-imposed restriction that is expected from the media when they are reporting events like this. Why do you think newspapers and media channels, the mainstream media, if not the social media, they would blur any gore images where there is blood, violence, etc. Because they keep in mind the sensitivity of the issue and the exposure they have to situations like this. So you need to understand this. And then with respect to regulation, there is a DNA identification bill. What exactly is that? I want you to link this DNA identification bill to Article 21, right to privacy. In what conditions is it okay to use DNA samples, and in what conditions it is not okay? Can we present this as evidence? With respect to Article 20 and Article 22, with respect to evidence, in what cases can we directly use DNA samples, blood samples as evidence? In what cases we cannot? Can we use this as an evidence for detention? Can we use this as an evidence for incrimination? These are the questions that you need to ask. Not directly related to this, but on the periphery. If I'm giving you this homework, please take it very seriously, because these are previous year's question themes. Okay? Are you following me, everyone? Now, yeah, with respect to this news about Tagore, what are the questions that you need to ask? So, an event happened where ancestral property of Rabindranath Tagore was destroyed. What is the relation of Tagore and Bangladesh? You would be surprised to know that, if you don't know, that the national anthem of both Bangladesh and India are written by Rabindranath Tagore. So, what are his contributions to literature and national movement? Just a quick revision. When you're doing this revision, I want you to create segmentation. His contributions to art, his contributions to literature, his contributions to national freedom movement. How did he contribute to education sector? Okay, things like this. And we've already had this discussion, his contributions to the concept of nationalism. Okay. Okay, now this is the editorial that I was talking about. Now, what do you mean by aviation safety? Aviation safety. Common sense. What all components do you see in the aspect of aviation safety? Let's say, right from the word go, the minute you enter into an airport, the premises should have some security. The security personnel should be trained for all kinds of threats. It need not be about disasters like this. It can be about terrorist attacks also, safety checks. Okay, how do you streamline all of this issue? So the first stakeholder are the personnel, security personnel at the gates. But that regulation should not become so troublesome for the passengers that sometimes, if you want to go to Bangalore, for example, let's take a very practical situation. From Hyderabad to Bangalore, the cost is somewhere around 3,000, roughly 2,500 to 3,000 rupees if you book much in advance. I'm elaborating it slightly more so that you start thinking on those lines. I'm not here to give you information alone. I'm here to give you the backstory and the necessary tools for you to think. Newspapers are supposed to be used as articles where you practice thinking, not just sources of information. Clear? Because sources of information are limited, and I hope that you understood by now that unless you keep your information limited, you will not clear this exam. So let's say 2,500 to 3,000 rupees is the amount you would incur on a well planned flight journey. No matter where you are in Hyderabad, it would take at least 45 minutes to 1 hour to reach the airport earliest. Then, if the regulatory baggage and all that is taking up one more hour, for example, that would add up one more. And the air travel is 3 hours. Sorry, one hour more. Now we are at 3 hour mark. The airport in Bangalore is somewhere almost away from the city. So it would take almost 2 hours to reach the midpoint of the city. And depending on where you are located and the traffic, you would take at least 2 hours, or even more than that, 3 to 4 hours, which defies the whole point of a journey. So if you reverse engineer this, don't you think the location of airport is the first starting point, right? And regulatory checks should be taken into consideration. And for that location of airport, it should be safe. Say for example, if you want to keep the infrastructure around the airport free from events like this, it just started to take off and landed up on the buildings in the vicinity of the airport. So for planning aspects, do you think there needs to be some coordination with the local municipalities? Is it right to have? So someone might argue, what if the flight fails midway and crashes? We can't plan for events like that. But if you take a look at the history of disasters, there are many events like this across the history of civil aviation. The minute they take off, they crash. And the probability of that is very high in civil aviation disasters. So the planning stage should begin with the infrastructure building and the coordination required with the management of that airport, whether it is the Airport Authority of India or any private sector player. This is the way you handle it. Okay, this is the step number 1. Now step number 2, Directorate General of Civil Aviation, which is a body, technical body, which sets standards for every aspect of civil aviation, whether it is crew training, airports, aircrafts, aircraft handling, their licenses, their standards, regulatory audits, everything is taken up by DGCA. And then you have Airport Authority of India, which is like the real estate manager for many Government of India airports. Not every airport is built by private players. Okay, so there is a model called the PPP model, public-private partnership, where private players take up the initiative to construct these airports and transfer that to the government after making some profits out of it. That is a PPP model. A case to the point being Hyderabad Airport, which is constructed by GMR, and you will see such models across the country as well. Why do they do that? That's a different question. Infrastructure is needed for a growing city like Hyderabad, and there are shortfalls in government finances. Not entire funding can be borne by the state government at that point of time. So there is a concept called viability gap funding, meaning let's say if 1000 crores are required to construct a real estate lease, like let's say for example, and banks think it is only viable to give 800 crores. So the 200 crore deficit is funded by the government in the PPP model to make it viable. It is needed for that city at that point of time, but maybe the traffic is not high enough to make sure that you get revenue of 1000 crores in that limited time. If you are expecting that I'll recover this 800 crores in next 4-5 years, but not 1000 crores, you only have a time period of 5 years. So the deficit is given by the governments. So you have DGCA, you have Airport Authority of India. In the event of a Government of India airport owned by Government of India, and then you have the private players, and then you have the Ministry of Civil Aviation, which is like the policy making body, and the next stakeholder that you need to consider is airlines themselves. If you notice across the world, this aircraft, Dreamliner by the Boeing 747, which is considered to be one of the best aircrafts, go back and check the history of these aircrafts. There were many crashes like this. Even recently in Japan or some Southeast Asian nation, there was a crash in the last 2-3 years, same flight. And if you go back and check the history of the engineers who flagged this anomaly, technical difficulty, strangely enough, all of them died. Here you have to talk about the concept of vigilance and whistleblowing. What do you mean by whistleblowing? Whistleblowing is a concept wherein an employee of an organization, whether it is a public organization or a private organization, comes out into the public, out of the organization, and says that there is something going wrong within the organization which is probably going to harm people. And that kind of a person who is trying to protect people needs to be protected, obviously. And that person is called a whistleblower, and we need to have a legislation, and that legislation is the whistleblower protection. Now the second question that you need to ask after the first set of questions, second question for governance and vigilance: do we have a whistleblower protection act in our country? If yes, what are the cases associated with it? If no, why is it not present? So this question is important not only for governance but also for your ethics paper. Clear? Fine. Now, you've understood the stakeholders in the civil aviation: DGCA, Airport Authority of India, private players, Ministry of Civil Aviation, and the airliners themselves. How do you think all these stakeholders should function? Obviously in alignment. Sometimes that alignment is missing. There are reports that this same flight has malfunctioned previously. Why was there no red flag? We don't know the cause of this. Is it negligence or is it willful negligence? What is the difference between negligence and willful negligence? Negligence means you know that there are some safety parameters that you need to check every time. Every flight will have a checklist. For example, tire pressure, landing gear, fuel tank, pressure check, toilets are cleaned or not. Is there wind turbulence? Is there traffic? How is the runway? Is it clean enough? Are there any, for example, when the flight is taking off, a simple thing like a piece of glass on the runway can cause havoc. If there is a tire burst when it's landing, imagine how many lives are in danger just because there is a small piece of glass. And because these checks are needed for, on a regular basis, a flight should be designed for worst case scenarios like turbulence. When you're in mid-air, turbulence needs to be factored in. If a bird hits the engine, there needs to be a backup plan for you to land. All these regulatory checks needed to be done, and this cannot be namesake. So when I'm saying negligence, is it willful negligence? Meaning you are supposed to tick all these boxes. You know there is something wrong, and yet you say it's okay to take off because you are prioritizing money. You're thinking that we can manage. Because yes, even if there is a small problem, flights do survive. But do you really want to have that mentality where you will put so many lives in danger just for one trip profit? That's a question. It's not just a question of, you know, governance failure. It's a question of ethics itself. Will that person who gives a check and says that it's okay to go, will he give that check if his family members are on that flight? No, right? Then why is it happening? That is why ethics is important. That is the difference between negligence and willful negligence. Negligence means you know that there is a checklist, but somehow you forgot this and moved on. You did not attach the kind of importance you are supposed to attach it to that situation. And secondly, when you're talking about willful negligence, you are intentionally aware that you're intentionally performing this, activity despite knowing the consequences because you think you will get away with it. The second case calls for a harsher punishment. But how will you know? We need to have procedures for that, right? That is the point. So the central point of this article is that the system is rigged because these regulatory audits and checks are not done regularly because there is lack of coordination and complete apathy. There are words empathy is actually a human being placing himself in the feet of the opposite person. Apathy means completely ignoring that. This is a concept in ethics. So this question is, this article is not just a question of governance failure, it's a question of ethical dilemma. And when you want to really improve the quality of your answers, we are no longer just okay with quoting Gandhi, Aristotle, all those thinkers which are part of mainstream textbooks now. You need to be original thinkers. So do you see an ethical dilemma in this article? Your ability to use this article in ethics is what decides your score in ethics paper. So don't look at ethics as a separate subject. It is an integral part of every activity where human beings are involved. Whether it is human, environment, economy, governance, polity, society, everywhere you will see this ethical dilemmas and dimensions. And this is how we are supposed to look at it. So, for prelims level, you have the stakeholders, respective roles. For governance level, you're talking about the acts and the legislations that keeps a check on these stakeholders. For ethics level, you're taking a look at the principles that we need to follow and linking it back to the concept of governance through public interest values like whistleblowing and vigilance. This is how we are supposed to look at this article. Once you understood this, everything else is like a story that you need to focus on. Okay, so what should be the focal point of investigation is what this article is questioning. So this last paragraph says that when you have global aviation bodies such as National Transportation Safety Board from the United States and the Air Accidents Investigation Branch from UK, now a part of the crash investigation, as a part of that, the officials should look at obstacles in the takeoff funnel. So basically what we are saying is we do not have a body that has the ability to investigate accidents like this, and yet we continue to operate again just like that. What is the compliance? What is the responsibility of Air India in this? What is the responsibility of the manufacturer Boeing in this? On whom should we place that responsibility? That's a big question. For all these questions, we need to find an answer eventually. Okay, next up. this article is positioning Israel-Iran issue as a continuation or a continuum of a civilizational conflict. 2600 years ago, a Jewish temple was destroyed by then Persian ruler. Okay, and that became the flashpoint or the beginning of the conflict between Jews and Iranians, Persians. Okay, so whatever you're seeing right now is not a sudden flare up of tensions in that region. It's a historical conflict that began 2600 years ago. When you look at any article like this from a historical standpoint, it's like you're framing an argument from a historical continuing standpoint. So this concept of historical continuum means that any conflict has its roots in history. And whatever you see today are the patterns repeating time and again. So the present conflict is nothing new. The nature of conflict changed. The weapons used changed. But the idea behind it has always remained across generations. And how did that animosity pass on from one generation to others? Why did that cycle did not break? These are the questions you need to ask in any conflict, right? If you want to arrive at a diplomatic mid-ground, having an awareness of the civilizational conflict is core to that design. This is the major takeaway from this article. This is for the essay level. Now, for GS2 international relations, how do you want to read this article? So this article says that there is an apprehension in the Arab world and there is a reason why Israel is feeling that they need to carry out retaliatory attacks. The recent IAEA, did you read about this IAEA? What is the full form? Right. So, recently, like couple of days ago, IAEA announced to the world that we are probably not sure if Iran is actually complying with the safety standards. And this led to a near diplomatic isolation. That diplomatic isolation, because of this trigger from IAEA, gave some reason for Israel to react. As such, Israel was always feeling that we have talked about the doctrine of proxies yesterday. Israel has been feeling that Iran is using this proxy warfare methodology by deploying organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, what is the role of Yemen in this? Where will you find Hezbollah? Question. Please read the articles, okay? Hezbollah. Where will you find Hamas? What is the map of Israel? What are the borders of Israel? So, what is the takeaway from this conflict is, first know the geography of that region. Your geography determines the history of that place. Every conflict in the world is broadly about two things: to have control over land and to have control over your mind. Your mind control is determined by the ideology. Your land control is determined by the power and might you have. We are always focusing on the first thing, but we have to take a look at the second thing, and all the more importantly in the present digital age, where the next frontier of warfare is always cyber. Okay, ideological warfare. If people's minds are shaped through narratives, there is a very beautiful book called, I forgot the name of the book, latest one, Yuval Noah Harari. What is the name of the book? Anyone you remember? It released in September 2024 itself. I read the book but forgot the name of the book. It's about how you set narratives. Yuval Noah Harari. This is a very interesting book. Okay. See, I'll tell you the gist of the book. Okay. Uh, it's about how narratives can shape human history. When I say narrative, what do you mean by that? A story that you construct carefully in such a way that it becomes true no matter where you see it from. For example, you tell a story to a generation from social media, traditional media, colleges, jobs, personal life, public life, everywhere, and you make it mainstream. That narrative becomes a part of your identity. And that narratives keep on driving societies. And if something disturbs that narrative, that force that disturbs that narrative will be resisted. Across history, if you take a look at it, for example, medieval ages, no matter where you are looking at across the globe, different time periods are called medieval. For example, in India, you might say medieval India started somewhere around 1100 and lasted till 1750, according to our classical historical classification. That need not be the same for entire world. The characteristic feature of medieval ages is lack of scientific temper. Nobody questioned. There are just blind beliefs, superstitions, according to which societies function. The conflict between the church and the state and the science is a historical example. And it's not just for one particular society in Europe or anywhere. Across the world that has been the case. Where after a point, growth of science and technology came to a halt, and that is primarily linked to blocking of trade. Globalization is not a phenomenon of post-technology era. We all think globalization is a concept that we are only looking at in post-World War era, but that's not true. Take a look at the entire history. How did civilizations grow? It is because of trade. If this is not globalization, I don't know what is. Globalization is a process that will bring goods and also ideas from distant lands to this land, and from this land they will take away something, if not goods, but also ideas. This is globalization, and as a part of that narrative construct, taking help from Yuval Noah Harari, etc., take a look at this issue of the Jewish-Persian conflict and its impact across the world. Just like the construction of that argument from that standpoint, where you can use this as the beginning point of many of the philosophical essays, you will see that again there is this king called Nebuchadnezzar II in 586 BC. So a single person doing some activity has triggered a chain of 2500 years, 2600 years of conflict between two countries and civilizations. They're not two countries, two civilizations I'll call. Because the idea of a country or a nation and its political boundaries might have changed, but the boundaries set in the minds of the people from one generation to another, that did not change. That is the importance of reading history. This is the argument that I want you to have. Now we are talking about the IR analysis. We spoke about world history. Now we are speaking about IR. What are the terms that you need to use in your answers when you want to describe this? And since we are preparing for civil services of Indian democracy, let's look at all the international relations from our standpoint. Let's say if two countries are fighting, what is its impact on India? India's bottom line, or the way India approaches any diplomatic issue from the last few years, is by the principle of strategic autonomy. Please note down this word. If you want to describe India's central foreign policy initiatives and uh, guiding principles, the word is strategic autonomy. What do you mean by this word strategic autonomy? I'll give an example. India is a close partner to Israel, especially in the realm of defense technology. Technologies where wastewater treatment and desalination technologies are very famous, because Israel is literally desert. They are able to grow vegetables in a desert, and whenever they have access to sea, they are able to use seawater. What kind of technology can facilitate that? India has been curious, and it has been getting some help, especially in agricultural technologies, defense technologies. So Israel and India relations are important for our needs. But does that mean we have to take the side of Israel? No. We are also dependent on Iran, because we have our infrastructure facilities like Chabahar port. Please note down and check what is Chabahar port. Where is it located? Identify. Go to a map, check Chabahar port in Iran. See, if this is India and this is Pakistan, this is Iran. Here you have this port, and in Pakistan you will have Gwadar port. So these are all locations that are very important and are there in your news from almost 1 decade. UPSC can ask anywhere. And recently in this year's exam you have had this INSTC. Okay, go to Google and search what is this INSTC and what are all the countries that are involved in this. Don't try to by heart, note it down and observe on the map. Whenever locations are there, without map, you will never be able to score these questions right. Which countries is it passing through? If you are the UPSC examiner, you will see the newspaper articles, and let's say if there is a discussion that since Pakistan is taking China's help and they are constructing this Gwadar port, they will have something parallelly there. We will have something parallelly there. For example, Chabahar port. Chabahar port is like our answer to act as a gateway to that region. And from Chabahar port, we want to enter into Afghanistan to build ties with Afghanistan and bypass Pakistan. We did that to an extent, but then US moved out of Afghanistan. Since 2001, they were in Afghanistan, they moved out. And Taliban came in. You can understand the level of complexity and unpredictability involved in international relations when you read issues like this. See, it's easy to sum up whatever was given in the article, but that's not how you should read. Yesterday I explained some basic examples, IAEA, and then I explained, what else did we talk about yesterday? Non-proliferation treaty, JCPOA. These are issues that are central to that article. Unless until I elaborate on those issues, you will not be able to link them to the central conflict. So this is the central conflict. It's a battle of your minds. Why are two countries fighting for 2600 years? Is it for real estate? At the heart of it, that's what it is. It's a real estate conflict. Who should own that piece of land? And what are the repercussions of that kind of a battle? That's what we are looking at. We started with the core philosophical debate which is important for your essay. Then we moved on to the world history part, and now we are talking about what is the world history angle. We are talking about the conflicts in history, colonialism, globalization, the history of globalization, and we are moving to the GS2 part, international relations, whatever events that are happening across the globe, its impact on India. And in that dimension, when we're talking about the impact on India, we're talking about a concept called strategic autonomy. You can quote that international organizations like this can have a very effective mechanism, how it literally isolated Iran from any kind of help. This diplomatic isolation became the flashpoint of conflict. Use terminologies like this in your answers. This flashpoint in the West Asia or Middle East, however you call it from different. See, West Asia, if you are in India. Middle East is a terminology used by political scientists in US because it is to the east. We should call it West Asia. Now go to Ministry of External Affairs and look at the various divisions of Ministry of External Affairs. These divisions are divided as per the geographical location. Now when you take a look at this Gulf region, is it called Middle East or West Asia? Go and check. Or is there some other name? There is also some other concept called MENA. Okay. Take a look at this. These are the homeworks for you. Okay, we spoke about strategic autonomy. Now we are talking about the other dimensions. What are the other dimensions? First we spoke about our relations to Israel. Then now we have to see with Iran. Iran is the area where it is there in the Middle East and Gulf. Nearly 60% of our crude oil imports are coming from this region. In last month, when we were discussing the importance of energy Atmanirbharta, we spoke about the need for diversification. Because of this conflict, another probable prelims question, there are important flashpoints or choke areas like geographical locations which will probably stop the passage of ships. Strait of Hormuz. Please note down. Where will you find this Strait of Hormuz? Go to your map and see. Okay, now another question also you need to consider. What is a strait? What is a strait? Okay, there are two seas and there is water here. Sorry, two pieces of land, there is water here. What is this called? Okay, there is a piece of land and there are two seas. What is the scenario called? Yes? See, there is a country here. On this side there is one sea, on this side there is another sea. And if there is a small passage or a small water body that connects them, how will you describe this situation? Go and check. Go back to your geography basics. Geographical features. What is a strait? What is a gulf? What is a bay? Okay, anyway, coming back. So your international, newspaper should be studied like this in your initial days. It will take time initially, but it will become much more interesting because you will learn the art of observing things. Initially, it might take time and it's okay because you're not wasting time, you're training your mind. As time passes by, even in the initial days when you're doing activities like this, you can actually learn a lot of things. But the problem is, you will not know where to stop. That is why these classes are important. I am telling you the backstory. I am giving the kind of questions you need to observe. If you do that homework, it will not take you more than an hour. An hour spent here will develop that mind of analysis, and an hour spent there will train your mind for looking at the article from prelim standpoint, main standpoint, essay. Okay, that's how you effectively use a couple of hours in your initial days. Over a period of time, you don't need so much explanations, because for example, in the last month, the predominant theme has been how to analyze an issue from fundamental rights standpoint. Now, if you are someone who is already trained, I don't have to explain Article 1921, how to analyze fundamental rights, etc. Now, today you are looking at GS2 international relations. Today we have explained, today we have explained the frame of argument as to how you have to approach an international relations issue is something that I explained and you have internalized. Everything is now about picking up data pointers and cherry picking for prelims. This is what you have to do. Anyway, coming back. What is its impact on China, on India? Shipping lines. This will increase the cost of fuel imports. Okay. So since this will increase the cost of fuel imports, you will have to know a concept of current account deficit. What is current account deficit? Go and check. Read the basics of external sector. Read current account, capital account, invisible goods, visible goods, impact of current account deficit and its relation to inflation. And read the concept of imported inflation. Do not expect to be spoon-fed. If you don't do this activity, you will not think. Training your mind to think again and again. I'll tell this every single day. But if you don't do this activity, these things will keep on piling up and you won't be able to leverage situation. Okay. So this is the historical conflict, its impact on the world, and India will have this issue. How to deal with this? Okay. Now, here I will talk about something called end game strategy. End game strategy. Another keyword. End game strategy, non-hyphenation policy. Okay, these two, no, sorry, dehyphenation, not non-hyphenation, and non-alignment. These three principles you have to note down. Non-alignment is a part of our history. This has the historical basis in world history, especially after the Second World War, in a concept called Cold War. There are two broad philosophies, capitalism and then you have socialism, and slightly you have communism also. There is a difference between socialism and communism and capitalism. After the destruction of the World War, Second World War, where every major nation was literally destroyed. Why did that happen? Because of a concept that originated in 19th century. Go back in history and read this concept of balkanization. We already spoke briefly about this concept in our lecture on nationalism. Balkanization means there is an area in Central Europe. A lot of countries in that region broke down into multiple smaller countries during this period. That process of breaking down of big countries into smaller groups is called balkanization. What is this word Balkan? Go and search. Write down. Balkan. Is it mountain? Is it a peninsula? Is it a region? Is it a race? It must be something. So go and read. What is that balkanization? Okay? With these understanding, you will have to come back and check our Cold War era. So in the Cold War era, after the destruction, should we allow efficiency and market competition as the way to improve our wealth? Because after the destruction, the countries did not have money. So this is US's answer, capitalism. Whoever brings a new idea, a new business to the world, they will survive. Survival of the fittest. So capitalism requires countries to get accepted, right? Like for example, if US produces something, there should be a market for that once it's exported. So capitalism plus democracy is the answer of US. On the other hand, countries like China went for communism, where there is an absolute state control, and there are other countries where there is state control plus democracy. No matter which government comes into the picture, you will only have dominance of public sector. India adopted somewhere in between these two. Mixed economy. Before 91, 99% it is the state, socialism, plus 1% of private sector. Just giving a rough number, don't take it literally. So during this era, India was very skeptical because we are coming out of the colonial clutches from the British. 250 years of British rule impacted our Indian society in both good ways and bad ways, but largely in a very bad way. So we are very doubtful about adapting capitalism because look at our history. East India Company. What is it after all? It's a company that came into our country to say that we want to do trade. Indian history is not, alien to the concept of trade. We were trading with Roman empires from a very long time. But the nature of East India Company to control cost frictions in the society, that created a lot of doubt in the post-independent era. So we did not go to capitalism, and we were also apprehensive of communism because we are seeing Russian Revolution, the kind of model that China adopted. We did not want a dictator to tell what is right and what is wrong. And it will not work for India because of the diversity we have. So we went and created this non-alignment strategy where we said we will neither go towards Russia, USSR, or we will not go to US side also. Okay. So this Cold War has led to a initiation of our foreign policy. The first point of how we deal with countries is non-alignment. Now, a lot of freshers confuse this non-alignment with concepts like endgame strategy and dehyphenation. And that is the reason I am bringing this up. Dehyphenation, see, non-alignment means neither here nor there. We are not engaging with anyone. We are not taking sides. But dehyphenation means we are engaging with both the sides. Let's say you need Israel. You need Iran. We need both of them. Just because of this conflict, if Iran is asking India to take its side, otherwise we will not give, crude oil. That is not how India functions, because that destroys our sovereignty. Our ability to take decisions independently are attacked by another country, which is nothing but something similar to what happened with British. So we don't want that. Now Israel says that, hey, I'm giving you technology for agriculture, everything, defense. You are not going to support me. Of course we are not going to support them at that point, because that will harm Indian interest. Our mantra is strategic autonomy because that is how you maintain your sovereignty. Right? Why are we engaging with Israel? Because we have something that they need. Why are they engaging with us? Because we have a large market. So do not bring trade issues with diplomatic issues. Don't club both of them. That de-hyphenation or de-linking of trade with international issues or diplomatic issues, and the de-linking between two countries where India is not expected to be a partner of that conflict is called de-hyphenation. Clear? Another concept is end game strategy. What do you mean by this end game strategy? What is the long term benefit? What is the long term vision we stand for? India should always take decisions based on this end game strategy guidelines. If we take sides now, that will be remembered, that will set a precedent, and we are not expected to do that, at least via diplomatic channels. See, what this is where you will understand the concept of para-diplomatic channels. Diplomatic channels, para-diplomatic channels, and non-state actors. These are some of the terminologies that you have to understand. Diplomatic channel, again you will have diplomatic channels. You have something called state level interventions, where heads of the state, let's say for example President of India, or on the behalf of President, Prime Minister, deal with their counterpart, Prime Minister Modi and their Prime Minister Netanyahu. They engage in talks. Then you have track 2 diplomacy, where ministers, let's say external affairs minister or defense minister, engage with them. And then you have para-diplomatic channels, where let's say scientists from India and Israel are engaging in conversation, or artists are engaging in conversation. Whatever may be the group identity, they are engaging in conversation. And then you have non-state actors, meaning they do not actually represent the government, but they associate their loyalty to one group. This word non-state actors is usually used more in the context of terrorism. Non-state actors attack the sovereignty. Non-state actors have an impact on cyber security, because these are the most difficult people to handle. Clear? I am explaining all the concepts so that we are setting a ground for our future international relations discussions. I will not explain this again for the same group. Okay? So please have some patience today. Para-diplomatic channels. So track 1 diplomacy, track 2 diplomacy, para-diplomatic channels, non-state actors, Cold War, de-hyphenation, end game strategy. These are the terminologies that I will use casually in the future classes. So I'm expecting that you understand this. Clear? So when you have non-state actors attacking our sovereignty, how will we handle that situation? This is one more thing that you need to handle. And finally, trade is usually the immediate area that will be affected. For example, these attacks were happening, market crashed by 1% yesterday, oil prices increased. So that is the effect of immediacy. Another word that you can think, immediacy effect. You will see in conflicts. Okay. So these are the things that you need to know for understanding international relations. And finally, if you have to talk about the impact of international relations, this is it. Okay. Impact of international relations on Indian interests. This is it in the context of Israel and Iran. These are the keywords that you need to focus on. I will use these points again and again in your article so that it becomes very natural to you. When you talk, you have to talk like a diplomat. When you are writing your answers, talk like a diplomat. When you use words like strategic autonomy, de-hyphenation, non-alignment, endgame strategy, retaliatory flashpoints, you are replicating the language of the Ministry of External Affairs and the diplomatic channels. And that is an expectation from you. Because you are communicating a very complicated idea through official jargon. And your inability to use these words will cost you marks. Because you will be writing more to communicate the same thing. You will also see this de-hyphenation policy in the context of Rohingya refugees issue. There are certain Supreme Court judgments on de-hyphenation policy. What should be the approach of India? Should we accept refugees? Do we have a refugee policy? All these are associated issues. You might be wondering, where did we start, where did we end? But that's how international relations is. Okay, so that's it for today. Please do the homework, be very vigilant. This is the basics that you need to know for international relations. I think most of the issues are covered. No matter how many classes you sit and listen to the stories, these are the keywords that will actually make a difference in your answers. In fact, if I have to say, if you want to read India's relations with other countries, these concepts are enough. In any issue in the future, when we are dealing with India and its neighborhood, we will be dealing with another set of keywords and issues to understand the backstory. Because the way we deal with our neighbors is different from how we deal with far off countries. Because you can't have a battle front on both the frontiers, Pakistan, Pakistan on the left and China the right. This is called the 2.5 frontier war. There are some more concepts like five-finger policy of China, neighborhood first policy, Gujarat doctrine, Act East policy. What are our relations with immediate neighborhood? What are the important multilateral organizations in this region? SAARC, BIMSTEC. Okay, and then you have infrastructure projects in the Northeast. All this, again, you have to read China's policies. You will have to read the importance of having strategies to contain China. You have issues like Quad. All this we will be discussing in future classes. But for today, whenever you are looking at any issue which is far off from India, these are the policy frameworks in which you have to think and generate points to write answers in your mains. And also the important takeaways for your prelims. This is how you do newspaper analysis, not just take information. And you will get there eventually. Have some patience, be consistent, you will get there someday. Okay? That's it for today. See you tomorrow.